Well, it's 9:15, so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and we can start the recording if this is my note for you. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the very first session hour of BriForum. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming this morning, and for coming to my session as well, in particular. So, of course, Of course, the PowerPoint is a little bit slow to respond. So I'm Jack Madden. As Brian said, I'm sort of the younger, slightly skinnier version of Brian. You can tell I'm the one with the glasses. And I spend most of my time these days, 95% of my work time these days, dealing with enterprise mobility management and mobile devices. So there's me. I live in San Francisco, California. I like English breakfasts. I started off today with a good breakfast at a hotel, black pudding and everything, so that was good. Besides eating English breakfast, I present at Tech Target events, at Citrix Synergy. I'll be on a session at Synergy coming up next week for any of you that might be there. And this is my third BriForum to present at. I am an employee of Tech Target, so my job is as a full-time blogger and a journalist. So I don't work for any vendors. I'm purely an independent blogger with Tech Target. With Tech Target, I have this podcast with my fellow editor, Colin Steele. And as you heard this morning, I was a contributor of the book to the book, The VDI Delusion, that we're just putting out the new version of today. So I did a few of the chapters. There's a little bit of mobile content in there. So please check that book out. But the reason why we're here today, of course, so this is my new book. The cover, I just met with somebody a few weeks ago to have this designed, and it's not quite the final yet. What do you think of this cover? I'm really looking forward to having this book out. This book, by the way, this is 49,591 words, and today we only have 75 minutes. Well, we only have 72 minutes now. So this is going to be a quick overview, really, of the book, because there's really not nearly enough time as we need to get in depth as far as we need. And the reason why I'm writing this book is, as Brian said in the keynote this morning, as our jobs move beyond the desktop windows, and suddenly these mobile devices, we have to care about them, perhaps much more than we used to. And this field of enterprise mobility management, a year ago, it's interesting, a year ago, we called it MDM, for mobile device management, but now, we have mobile application management, we have so many other things, and finally we're putting all of those acronyms in a bucket and using another acronym to refer to all of them as just enterprise mobility management. And this underscores how this is, in concept, very similar to the session that I gave a year ago here in London at BriForum, but so much has changed within this industry that I can really be giving this again, and it's very, very different from last year. You'll notice that this is Enterprise Mobility Management 2013 edition, so I expect that 2014 will be different. Oh, I don't like the look of that. Well, we'll hope that doesn't happen again. So I'm just going to go through the book pretty much chapter by chapter, because this is, I've worked out a good way to tell the story of enterprise mobility management. And so that's what we're going to do today. So first, before we get too knee-deep in all of the muck of MDM and MAM and APIs and configuration profiles and application distribution, it is good to take a step back and just take a look at the full picture of why we're here. I've got a good connection here, I think. So, you know, what is important to remember when we're knee-deep in all the minutia of managing mobile devices is really, I see 4 people up here in front with iPads. And this is going to sound maybe a little bit lofty and aspirational, but the reason why we're talking about this enterprise mobility management is really because of how much it really enables us to do in our jobs that's so completely different than we did before. And I know that sounds like a bunch of marketing crap. Like, look at what happens when we enable mobility. But remember, it really is true that we can do so much now that we couldn't before with mobile devices, and it's really important to remember that is why we are here. So with that, with my discussions of enterprise mobility, I sort of have some truths that I like to outline. That these are fundamental assumptions that I take for the rest of the conversation that are not. These are not up for arguments. I'm taking these 7 truths as given when I discuss enterprise mobility management. So first off, we're done with the debate of, are these devices just toys? You know, like, is an iPad a legitimate business device? Is an iPhone just a toy compared to a BlackBerry? Maybe people might have had that iPad debate 3 years ago when they first came out, but we're not going to have that debate here. You know, we have users that want to use the iPad, and it is a legitimate tool. You know, while the users, they might think of themselves like as this, doing all the cool things when they're on their iPad, and when a user comes up to us and says, "Can we get email on this?" You know, it kind of maybe seems something more like this. That may be all well and good, but for the purposes of this discussion, this is a tablet, and are these new mobile devices, are these legitimate tools? That's not up for debate. We're giving that as a given. The second big thing, some of you might have seen before Brian's session on the consumerization of IT. We've been talking about this, for 2 years now, and how the real story of consumerization is FUIT, F-U-I-T, that users, thanks to all the user craziness, the users are in control and they can kind of do whatever they want. How many of you people are familiar with the term FUIT or F-U-I-T as Brian uses it? Okay, so a good proportion. So it's that saying no to what users want to do doesn't quite work as well as it did anymore, because we can always, there's always Gmail, there are cloud services that they can buy easily. I see a new adapter on its way, so hopefully we'll get this problem with the screen fixed. Number 3, when it comes to dealing with consumerization, we're past the hard part now. When consumerization first happened, when personal devices started getting much more powerful than what we had the money to provision, as IT. As that transition was happening, and it may have been happening without our knowledge, that was very difficult to deal with, and that was a big headache. But we know that the consumerization of IT exists now. We know that we're in this place where we have to deal with users that can go to the electronics store and buy stuff, buy things like iPads. So because we know that we're past this hard part, we're in a good place because we can expect it now. Number 4 of the truths, it doesn't take BYOD to get modern mobility anymore. This should be pretty self-evident. When iPhones and Androids were new, of course, they were all personal devices. But now that there are plenty of companies that are buying their employees these new devices, we can't just say that, oh, the iPads, they're only BYOD, or oh, the iPhones are only BYOD. They're corporate devices too, as well. Another thing is that BYOD and consumerization are unrelated. So just because you have personal devices in your environment doesn't mean that you get consumerization. So really, the theme here is that I'm divorcing BYOD from consumerization. I'm divorcing BYOD from flashy new devices. BYOD is its own separate subject, and you'll see that it gets handled separately from all of the technological issues because it's really much less of a technology issue than so many marketers would have you believe. Number 6, having said that, we will always have to deal with some BYOD in our environments. For example, so this is my apartment at home. You see on the far side, you see my corporate issued laptop. On the end of the couch where I'm sitting, you see my iPad and my MacBook Air and all my personal devices. It's Saturday afternoon. I have to do something, fix a blog post on the website or something or other. Which one of those devices do you think I'm going to pick? It's going to be one of those ones. I can tell you that for sure. And the other thing, Monday morning, I have that iPad. What happens when I come into the office Monday morning? What's going to keep me from bringing that iPad into the office? Maybe a metal detector. So it's something that we will have to deal with all the time. But finally, you can see I'm sort of going back and forth on BYOD here. But the main point is that BYOD, again, it's not a technology issue anymore. It's much more of a human resources issue. And frankly, when it comes to accommodating mobile devices, who bought the device is the last thing that we have to worry about. So no longer is the question, can we support personal devices? That's not the question anymore. The question is, can we support this device platform? Can we support iOS? And can we support Android? We have our things that matter are supporting iOS, supporting Android, being able to mix work and personal applications on the same device. That matters a lot. Providing access to data and applications on those devices. That matters a lot. Things that don't matter or matter much less is BYOD. I think I've probably made my point by now about BYOD. So I'll let that rest for a little while. And so by now we're in another month we'll have had the iPhone around for 6 years now. So you probably all know the story. How we got here because we all lived it. We had for so many years we had BlackBerries. They were corporate devices, corporate managed, corporate provisioned. There was no question about them. And users' personal phones might have been something like this. This is a Motorola Razr, the most popular flip phone of all time. How many people had one of those? They were a cool phone. But then, of course, 2007 with the iPhone happened, and we all know how that happened. And at the same time, so this is Time magazine. Well, okay. I know that that's there now, so I think I'll be okay with that. First session of the morning, folks. It's only 9:30, so it's still early. But think back to, remember when people were using the term Web 2.0? Now I realize that nobody's used that term in about 5 years probably, but when the iPhone came out, we were at this time of personal empowerment. The web is personable. The web is yours. You can go do anything you want, and we sort of raise this whole generation of entitled, we can do anything we want people, and that was perfect that created the perfect storm when the iPhone came out of, I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to use it for work anyway. And of course, that was a big problem because in the early years for corporate IT, these things, they were indeed completely and utterly unmanageable. They were just consumer, consumer nothing that were completely unmanageable for the first 2 or 3 years until in 2010 when we had modern mobile device management as we know it. There were a few innovations. The Android device administration API came out, and iOS configuration profiles gained the ability to connect a device over the air to a remote server. So that was 2010. So suddenly that management problem in 2007, that's gone now. We don't have to worry about that anymore. And there's, the story is more complicated than just the introduction of these features in 2007. And there was just recently I published these articles were an excerpt from my book, actually, the whole history of enterprise management features in iOS. And there's a lot of stuff in there. It's really interesting. Of course, we know from Android, there are fewer management features in there, but it's an interesting story to follow nonetheless. So that brings us into looking at these operating systems themselves. So iOS and Android, of course, they are very different from Windows. What we've been dealing with for years and years, and this is both a good thing and it can be a difficult thing because we definitely don't have the level of control that we're used to dealing with. But some of the fortunate places, so of course, as we all know, iOS and Android have fundamentally sandbox applications so that apps can't go and mess with each other's data. And for the most part, these are, they're very nearly stateless operating systems. It's, sort of, I've had so many people tell me that these new operating systems, these are like the holy grail of what we've been, hoping for years in terms of sandbox apps and stateless operating system. So many built-in security features instead of security features bolted on years later. These were designed to be mobile. They were designed to work with the internet. There are restrictions around application distribution. Applications install and remove, quickly and easily with a touch of a button. So we're really dealing with a different beast here. And when it comes to application distribution, again, as we all know, we have the Apple App Store where we go for our public apps, and those apps, Apple knows who the developer is of all of those. If that app is doing something bad, that app can be pulled from the store. We have our, there's a developer program, and important and interesting for us, of course, is the iOS Enterprise Developer Program that we can use to distribute applications to in-house employees. Apple also has its volume purchasing program and its B2B app store. Again, I'm just going down these one by one, but there's much more in depth that we could go into the nuances of basically everything that's today. And I know it sounds like a cop-out to say this, but believe me, it's all in the book. And we do see the differences between the iOS world and the Android world. Of course, we have our Google Play as the analog to the Apple App Store. But of course, the thing about Android is that getting an application signed is much easier to do, and we have alternative app stores, and we can have our devices locked into other app stores. And but really, since almost anyone you can sign your own app, put it up on a website, and anybody can download it. There's no dealing with a company taking a cut of it. It's a much more free world of distribution. So we take those devices that we have and those restrictions around application distribution, and then, like I said, in 2010 we started having this thing called mobile device management. So what is MDM? This MDM is like sort of our big word of like 2011 and 2012. We know that we can think of it as policy for the iPhone and iPad and Android, and we get all of these features, and we have the passwords and the VPNs and the device locking, and so many there are 100 different vendors out there that will say we have MDM and we have features such as these, and and you go, great. Well, what does that mean? So the way that I like to take it apart when thinking about it. So this is the world that we're in. I use this sky background because our devices are out there in the world. But really, so this consists of 3 parts. First, of course, we have our manageable devices. So what do I mean by a manageable device? I mean that you can configure settings on the device. You can you can set up accounts. You can set up the VPN and the Wi-Fi connections. What else makes a device manageable? The other is querying the state of the device. So you can find out the location of the device. You can find out what applications are installed on the device, identifying information about the device, how much storage is left on the device, and you can take certain management actions on that device. You can wipe that device. You can lock it. You can reset the password. Now, to have a device where we can do all of those things, that's wonderful. I can do all of those things on my device right now. I can go in there and look and see how much data is available, and that's great. But really, the important part is an over-the-air protocol to do that. Because without an over-the-air protocol, I could go around to each cubicle and enter the information to say you must have a password on this device, but that wouldn't be very efficient. And if anybody lost the device, then the ability to wipe the device is no good unless you can do it remotely via some sort of over-the-air protocol. And the final component, of course, is some sort of management server where you can take those queries and those management actions available to you, and you can use those to configure the device and do the settings and build all sorts of policies that you can imagine. So really, it takes all 3 of those components to make what we know of today as mobile device management. Now, many of you probably know that Exchange ActiveSync has mobile device management capabilities built into it. So, since most of the world is using Exchange, that means that most of us already have MDM in our environments right now, which sounds great, right? And Exchange, it can set the password, and it can set our email clients, so they have to be encrypted, and it can wipe the email clients. And then, looking into Exchange, you might see some other policies that have to do with like blacklisting applications and all sorts of settings about device behavior and everything. If you see those settings, don't get too excited because those are all just the old Windows Mobile 6 and 6.5 settings that don't really apply anymore. So really, you can think of it as just the basics with Exchange. Now, the interesting thing about Exchange is that since we often call it mobile device management, but we should clarify that those policies, they apply to the email client. And sometimes our email client is integrated with the device, and so sometimes those policies get passed through and applied to the entire device, like when we're using a native built-in client in your phone. But you can just as easily have that client be just an application. Of course, the App Store is full of third-party Exchange ActiveSync apps. And so that means that if you think you're protecting the entire device with those policies, there's no way that you can be certain that you're protecting that entire device. Now, you can set client access rules. They do get pretty granular. You can block down to specific device models. So you could say, I'm only going to allow the native built-in email clients to access my device or to access Exchange. So that way you know that you are protecting the whole device. But really, compared to what we'll see in a minute, is real MDM. There's a lot that's missing here. So some people will love to talk about Exchange ActiveSync as like the easy and free MDM solution, but it really is, it's MDM light. So coming into our more real MDM, many of you probably know that iOS has these things called configuration profiles. They came out with iPhone OS 2 in 2008, and it's an XML file that when it's installed on the device, it changes a bunch of settings. It can change your password settings, and it can tell the device that it needs to have a password, and it can wipe the device. The other thing that configurations profiles do, this profile can establish an over-the-air link back to that MDM server. So we have the configuration profile deals with the part one of MDM, the manageable configurable device. This profile establishes part two of MDM, and it contains all of the credentials to have the over-air connection back to the server. And one of the other things that you can do when you have that connection is you can, as an administrator, install applications. The user still has to accept and press yes, but you can install and remove applications whenever you want. The thing that you can't do is you can know what the user has installed on the device, but it is not possible for you using the iOS configuration profiles to blacklist any user-installed apps or to force the user to uninstall any apps. And we'll see in a few minutes why this is going to be very important for the challenges that enterprise mobility faces today. Another thing to learn more about these configuration profiles. So this is the iPhone configuration utility. It's free from Apple. It has all of these settings in a standard profile. And because whether you're a big MDM vendor, whether you're AirWatch or Mobile Iron, or whether it's just you and the configuration profile, the settings that are available on an iOS device are exactly the same from one MDM vendor to another. So that is very important to remember in the world of mobile device management. So moving on to the Android side, and we really do have to, in this case, treat these very separately because Android MDM is very, very different from iOS. Whereas in iOS, we have these clear, well-defined configuration profiles. In iOS, no such configuration profiles exist. And of course, while iOS it's a very tightly controlled ecosystem. We have Apple's software running on Apple's hardware using Apple's management protocol. As you all know, Android is free for the taking for the world, free for manufacturers to take and customize as they need. So Android originally, had no management features built in at all because the creators just assumed that the manufacturers would take care of any management features and just add it into their version of Android. But if you're a phone maker, if you're LG or something, and you want to put out the next hot new Android phone, is that manageability, is that top on your mind? Maybe not. But the end result of this is that since much of this management depends on what third-party manufacturers do, you can understand there that the management capabilities of Android are very fragmented. And this fragmentation word gets thrown around with Android very, very much. And it manifests itself in very many different ways, including when it comes to managing devices. Now, the creators of Android, they were smart people. So they realized soon enough that not all of the device manufacturers were putting the same management capabilities into their devices, and things really were kind of a mess. So in 2010, they, in that core version of Android, the version of Android that manufacturers take as their starting point to modify, they added the device administration API. So with version 2.2 of Android, that included password policies, the ability to remote wipe the device, and an API so that an application could lock the device. That was it, those three features. Version 3 of Android included the ability, an API, where you could build an app that says, OK, the device has to be encrypted. And version 4 added an API so that you could build an app that says that the camera has to be turned off. So what else does this mean? So what this means is that since there are no profiles, those are just APIs, that means that every single mobile device management vendor, you just build an app that interfaces with those device administration APIs. So no nice, neat profile, no nice, neat over-the-air protocols or anything. You just build it however you want. And you have those device administration APIs in the core version of Android. You have other APIs that, whatever the device happens to have, like the device, of course, there's an API for location, so your MDM app can know the location of the device. And then there might be whatever APIs the manufacturer happens to have added. But of course, if you're an MDM vendor, you want your app to work with Samsung phones and LG phones and Motorola phones and Huawei phones. And those OEM APIs, they're going to be all different for each one of those phones. So your app has to figure out how to find the average capabilities of all those completely different APIs. And really, if it sounds like a mess, it is. That's the number one, the number one thing to take away from Android is that your base level of capabilities is going to be very low, and everything else is a complete toss-up and a complete mess. Some companies do it very good. I haven't seen too many of these advertisements here in London, but how many of you have heard of Samsung Improved for Enterprise, Samsung Safe? They've been doing a huge marketing campaign. This is the subway station, the San Francisco Muni Underground station. And there they have mobile device management, of all things, advertised in the underground station you know, in that sign, 60 feet long, which is, you know, things are getting interesting and getting real when something as obscure as MDM is being advertised in the subway. But this is, you know, Samsung is making a very huge push right now. But even this is only Samsung devices. This is only a few of their Samsung devices. So again, you know, fragmentation is rearing its ugly head. So that is the most important thing. One of the most important things to keep in mind. Now, these mobile device management companies, there are a few big ones up here. There are so many vendors doing this, especially since with iOS, it's very, very easy to do MDM for iOS because remember the configuration profile exists and it's there for you. So we have, we have the concept of how mobile device management works. Now we're going to look at the reality of what happens when you go and apply this management capability in the real world. So, you remember that guy was tearing his hair out because those new devices, they were completely unmanageable. So now we have the ability to essentially turn an iPhone into a BlackBerry. So does this solve all of our problems with mobility today? Now we're only halfway through the session now, so if it did solve the problem, then this would be the end of the session. But of course, many of us, we probably know by now that just having the ability to turn an iPhone or an iPad into a BlackBerry, that does not solve our problem. That solves our problem from 2007, but it's 2013 now. Our users have issues with this. We have completely different relationships with our device, with our iPhones as we did with our BlackBerries. Many of these are personal devices. I use this every day. I bought this, and I'll be darned if you tell me how to use it. We have concerns about privacy issues. Some of the privacy issues are real. Some of them aren't. Like, laws, of course, vary by country. But there are very real issues that with many MDM software packages, my employer can track wherever this device goes, and they can see what all of the applications that I have on here. Now, there are also some privacy issues that people have that aren't real. Like if you're afraid of somebody reading your personal email because your device is being managed by your company, there's no MDM vendor out there that has the ability to do that, or that has the ability to read your text messages. But those issues do remain. And for IT, we have issues as well because for all those policies that we have for iOS, it's still not BlackBerry. I mean, you look at the list of policies available in BES 5. It's crazy. I can make it so that there are no notifications and so that the light always flashes anytime it's recording. If you think of the background of BlackBerry, remember this was I like to think back to Enron and MCI WorldCom, and in the U.S. we have Sarbanes-Oxley, those corporate compliance laws that came out in 2002, 2003. That's the world that BlackBerries came into. Whereas this thing, the lineage of this thing, is an MP3 player. Corporate accountability versus MP3 player. This is not the same as a BlackBerry. The other issue for IT, fragmentation, as I mentioned before, enough said. Jailbreaking and rooting these devices. There are if you jailbreak your iPhone, then you can, of course, you can install you can install apps from alternative marketplaces. And some vendors, they'll say that they can detect when a device is jailbroken, and sometimes they can, and sometimes they can't. And there are applications in Cydia, and third-party, underground jailbroken app stores that can they're specifically designed to lie to the MDM agent, so the phone tells the phone is telling the MDM server, like, yeah, I've got all these policies covered. Well, in reality, that's just a complete lie. So that is an issue that we have to deal with. Although, again, if a user is doing this maliciously, they're maliciously trying to lie to their company, that's been an IT issue for forever and will continue to be forever. So there's nothing that we can do about it. Another thing, if you decide that, well, part of our locking down our device is going to be blacklisting applications because they might be dangerous to have on the device. Great. There are like 750 million, 750,000 iOS apps and 750,000 Android apps. Have fun blacklisting. I think we all know that as a security tactic, blacklisting has its weaknesses. Now, I don't want this to come off like I hate MDM, because MDM really is brilliant at doing a lot of things, like setting up all those user settings. It can indeed make this into some sort of an approximation of a BlackBerry, and that is indeed something that we need today, and MDM is good for that. MDM also, if we want to use an iPad as a kiosk in a store or something, of course we're going to need to manage that. And compliance. Well, MDM may, there may be some issues, like if your rules state you must have a password on your phone and it must be protected, even though you may not be protecting against other threats, if you just want to check off the box for compliance, then MDM is great. So there are a lot of great things. But like I said, MDM, it solves the problem of 2007. But today is 2013. So what are the issues? What are the real issues that we face in 2013? Is it, bring your own device? Personal devices? I do not think personal devices are the issue that we face today. It's bring your own personal applications, personal data, and personal work styles is the real issue, not who owns the device. And why is this such an issue? Because of course, everybody, an iPhone is an iPhone no matter who bought it. So they're going to want to do personal tasks on their work-issued iPhone, and they're going to do work tasks on their personal-issued devices. And this is for sure a huge problem. And this right here, this sharing of personal and work on the same devices, this is the #1 issue that we face today. The issue is not, can we support personal devices? The issue is not, can we support an iPhone? It's, can we support work and personal tasks on the same device? So if any vendor tries to pitch you on MDM to support personal devices, you can tell them that that's a bunch of crap. And you can ask them this question. But why is this such an issue? As anyone who's used an iPhone for any period of time before, we know there are lots of ways to share data between our friends and between different applications. Of course, for the corporate world, that's lots of different ways to leak data. Let me demonstrate. This is my personal phone. You can see, I have my work email in here and all that's, personal junk that everybody has. Somebody, well, in this case, it's myself, but I get a top secret document in my email. I open that up in the email client, and then I hit that share button at the bottom. And so let's take this email, and now, like, hello, my personal app, Evernote, hello, Google Drive, hello, emailing it everywhere. It's great. It's really fun how we can share all this information from one app to another. But remember the list of capabilities that we had on MDM? So this is a mobile device. This is my personal applications, and these are my work applications, my work email. And all the sharing, these white arrows, that's that sharing that I talked about. Now, MDM, managing the device, MDM puts the perimeter of management around the entire device. So what MDM does not provide us is no visibility into, we can't control cutting and pasting here. We can't control which applications access the contacts, because when you put Exchange ActiveSync on the phone, the contacts are in the phone, and suddenly any other application, Facebook, Evernote, Dropbox, who knows, can access all of those contacts. They can all share photos indiscriminately. And this open-in, this other, sending a document from one app to another. So mobile device management, this sharing issue, this is our big issue, and that mobile device management does nothing about this sharing. It is possible, even though MDM doesn't do anything about the sharing, it's still possible to make it solve the problem of this personal stuff mixing together. So take a guess. How do you think we're going to solve this problem of the personal stuff mixing together when it can't have any vision into how that sharing goes on? So this is how it does it. So this is a phone when you buy it from the store, obviously. So how am I going to solve the issue of all those personal applications? Try this. We've now locked down the phone to email and phone. It's a BlackBerry. And we've solved the problem of sharing data between personal applications and work applications. That's the problem solved. Technically, yes, it is. But remember, it's not 2007 anymore. We love our apps. So what do? Even if this is my work phone, I'm going right out, hello, personal phone that I'm bringing in. And after a week, I'm going to get tired of juggling two phones. And I'm going to figure out some way to do my work on this personal phone. And clearly, we have a problem. So what we really need to do, we need to combine these two things together and figure out how to do them on the same device. Now, the term that I use for this is dual persona. I think a lot of people are using this term these days. And again, this is the number one challenge that we face today. So how do we enable dual persona on a mobile device? So there are a couple of different ways. How about remote Windows desktops? As like 3, 4, 5 years ago, the desktop virtualization, they came together and they said, hey, mobile devices, you need to have corporate data safely on the mobile devices. We've got that problem solved. We'll have a remote desktop on there. And I don't think for this audience I have to explain how much this does not work. We all know that it's a great party trick, and it's really cool. But when we have awesome native apps that we can use every day, that does not work. There's some other things that people are starting to do today. This morning Brian talked about Windows apps as middleware. So there are ways to make those individual applications that we might need to use on a mobile device easier to use. FrameHawk is one of these companies. The Citrix, the XenApp Mobility Pack, which Jason Conger's session tomorrow afternoon, I think, is going to cover that. So there are ways to make Windows work on, as one-off applications on phones. But for email and the stuff that you do every day, no. So we think, well, what about, so Windows on phones won't work for that dual persona issue. What about HTML5 or web apps? And here again, HTML5 apps. This book, this 50,000 word long book, I wrote this all in an HTML5 app. I wrote it all in Google Docs, and it works offline. I wrote a bunch of it on airplanes. It's awesome, and it provides a great mobile experiences for all sorts of reasons. But still, compared to native email apps and other native applications, it's just not going to cut it as our solution for for dual persona. And then this other thing, how many people have heard of VMware Horizon Mobile for Android, where they take a virtual instance of Android and put it on another phone? Now, there are a number of issues with this. Number one, it is very complicated, and the underlying operating system has to be heavily modified. So you have to deploy it with the cooperation of the carrier and of the device manufacturer. And VMware and some other companies have been talking about this since 2008, and it was VMware Horizon Mobile was just released. Literally, it was released yesterday, after nearly 5 years. And yes, it does work as a solution for dual persona. There's a complete bucket for personal stuff and a completely separated bucket for work stuff. But remember, this is only Android. This is only specific devices from specific OEMs. And it only came out yesterday. Needless to say, a mobile virtualization is not going to solve our dual persona issue. So we just went through 3 attempted ways: remote Windows, HTML5 or web apps, and mobile virtualization. Those 3 ways that aren't going to solve dual persona. The current front runner that I believe very strongly in, and you probably all know this term, mobile application management. And there are a lot of reasons why I believe that this is the way that dual persona will be solved and is being solved today. Now, when people think mobile application management, it can be confusing because people use the term MAM, mobile application management, to talk about app stores. And if you remember, there's a little bit of, on iOS, if we're managing a device, we can also, to some degree, deploy and revoke applications. But the problem is this: an app store, you can control who gets to download an application. But once an application is on the device, you can't really control how it interacts with the rest of the devices. So this is app stores and MDM as a method of managing applications. Yes, that's technically a way of managing apps and technically a way of separating work and personal. But for our purposes, it's not really going to work for what we need. So the real mobile application management that I'm talking about is internal, inside of an application, changing the behavior of an application. So whereas, for example, we have MDM, we have our management around the outside of the device. Let's look at this again with application management. This is my device here. I have my personal applications. I have my work applications, except I'm going to put the perimeter of control. I'm going to put the perimeter of control just around those work applications. So that means that I can make it so that those work applications can only talk to each other. And so now my personal applications can't share stuff in and out of the user applications. So that means that we get this divide between work and personal. We get that at the application level. And the other thing is, since all of this management stuff, since we build it into an application, we don't care what that device is. So that Android fragmentation, some devices, we can barely do anything to them. Some devices, we can do a lot. Well, that doesn't matter anymore. And that other stuff that only works on Android, well, guess what? Because you're working at the application level, this will work on any device that you can get the application to. So to me, that sounds pretty brilliant. Now, there are, of course, some caveats, but we'll get those to those. But the thing is, you'll see all of these policies. We can put policies on applications that before would have been on the device. So we can have the password be on the app. The app can have a VPN. We can remote wipe the application. We can encrypt the application. And we can also control how the applications interact with each other. We can make it so that it can only interact with other corporate apps or things like that. So we do get a lot of controls. But you're probably asking, where do we get all these manageable applications? Because the last time I checked, there was, I hate it when people, their default app that they talk about is Angry Birds. But I'll just say, OK, Angry Birds. The last time I checked, there was no remote encryption switch for Angry Birds. I don't know if you guys have seen anything like that, but I don't know about that. So all of these apps with all of these great features, how are we going to get those applications? Well, so first of all, the mobile application management vendors, the vendors that create this, they'll create some of the basics on their own, like the managed email clients, the browsers, the file syncing clients. They'll build those versions on their own and have those available to give to their customers. Of course, if you build an application in-house from scratch, you can take the mobile app management vendor's SDK and build all of the management hooks into your app. And then there's this thing you might have heard called app wrapping. And so app wrapping is this idea. It's like, hey, there's a vendor out there that has an application, and you want to use it in your environment with all of those management hooks. And maybe say, you say, hey, can we take your application? We're going to put it through this tool that will add all of the mobile application management hooks, the ones that we talked about in the previous slide. That'll repackage the app. We'll re-sign it. We'll distribute it on our own. And of course, like that vendor also might simply decide, a lot of people are asking for these manageable apps, and they want to be able to work with app management vendor X. So we're going to put out in the public app store a version of our application that is compatible with somebody's app management platform. And of course, there are plenty of applications that just don't need mobile application management. So there are a lot of different ways that you can get managed applications. I want to go over some of the typical applications that we might want to manage, and I know we've 17 minutes left, and 50,000 words to get into 75 minutes is really, really tough. And I don't want this whole session just to be a shameless plug for the book, but I guess I've kind of crossed that bridge already. But apps that you're going to want to manage today. So email clients, file syncing clients, secure browsers. Email, of course. Email is the #1 application that we think about on our devices. It's also the most difficult because especially in the iOS world, that built-in iOS mail client is going to be very different from the mail client that your mobile application management vendor gives you. But when it comes to mail, there are 3 options that are coming to emerge. Number 1, you use that built-in application that's in the device, and you have some mobile device level management. And so if you need to keep that safe, maybe you blacklist some apps, or maybe you decide that it's not such a big deal. Another option that a lot of people are doing is they'll proxy the Exchange ActiveSync connection before it gets to the device, and that proxy will encrypt the attachments. So the attachments and the email messages are delivered to the email application that's built in to the device, except because the attachments are encrypted, only the managed corporate applications will be able to open and decrypt those applications, or those attachments, I'm sorry. So that's kind of the middle of the road approach. And the third approach is having third-party applications. So you don't use the built-in mail app. And because of course it's a third-party app, and you're managing it, you can keep that app from sharing all that information with all of those other personal apps on the phone. Now there's some issues around a third-party app because a third-party app is it's just not going to be the same as your built-in native app, and the #1 issue is background syncing right now, where the iOS will not let third-party email apps download messages in the background. Yes, yes, that is really unfortunate. But right now today, we have to make the compromise. If we're using the built-in app, that means that we might have to blacklist users' applications. So I say, hey, give your users the choice. You can have us blacklist some of your applications, or you can use this third-party mail app that just be sure to open it up to sync before you get on the plane. And it really stinks that you have to make that choice today. But that's the way it is right now in May of 2013. Now the other apps, the other of those 3 core apps, file syncing. So you pick up this phone, you start using it for work, and it's like, hey, how do I get a T drive on here, where all of my work documents are? Well, of course, there is no file browser that we can just open up a network drive on here. So what do the users do? We head out and we find, Dropbox. And while Dropbox may not be secure, there are tons of, different versions of secure, corporate file syncing clients. After email, we all say, this is one of the first places that you head. Of course, you have, with this, you can have your authentication, you can have controls around offline use and encryption and how it's shared. You can do even more cool things like if somebody has a document on their mobile device that a watermark shows up, so if they try to screenshot it, you put their email address or something in that watermark, that makes the prospect of screenshotting that document a lot less attractive. Or how about having document editing built right into the file syncing client? That's been a recent wave of what some vendors have been doing, and that's very exciting. And of course, right here I have to go it goes without saying that modern file syncing and cloud file storage, many people associate them together. But going to this modern file syncing and having these modern file syncing apps in your environment to provide that access to your users, of course, it has nothing to do with cloud storage because so many of these products work with your existing storage. And so these few apps, these come pre-made from most of the application management vendors. These are like, they're pre-made, they're right there. They're such a small amount of effort, and they'll cover such a large amount of your dual persona use case. And then, for everything else, there's building more apps over time. There's, HTML5 and there's remote desktops apps, as I mentioned. Again, one of those apps is managed browser app that many mobile app management vendors have, and you can connect the VPN to just the managed browser instead of the whole device, so you don't have all the users' personal applications all there in your corporate network. Deploy all the shortcuts you want. So those are the basic. That's app management and the basic apps. So once you have those managed applications, sort of like the next step in this world of separating personal and private stuff is sort of wiring them together. I talked about how the apps communicate together. So imagine if this is your mobile device and you have all your users' crazy personal applications on the device, but hey, we're going to bring down our work email app and our work file syncing client and our work browser. And those are going to be able to communicate with each other. They'll be on the device, but they're going to be separate from all the personal stuff. And when the personal apps, when they try to share with those corporate apps, you can set all the policy you want. And then, of course, you will have to decide, what's in that app ecosystem and what's out of that dual persona ecosystem. And there is a lot that can be outside, because some people might be asking, you talk about these manageable apps and how do I get them to work with my other manageable apps, and how do I get all of these into the ecosystem? And really, not everything has to be part of that work ecosystem. Like I said, you can start with just those. You can start with just email or just those first few apps, and have everything else be out of the ecosystem and bring things in slowly. Now, as you are bringing apps into your ecosystem, this is where, again, I mentioned the sources for these manageable applications. They're the basic applications from vendors. There's the SDKs, the app wrapping, the public apps built with MDM. So this is, when you're looking at app management, it's like, if you want to be able to have in the future, be able to get as many applications into your corporate ecosystem as possible, having all of these different options is important to be able to, in the future, as you grow, build up a managed ecosystem. So again, an important consideration when building this dual persona ecosystem is the sources for application management. Another thing that I want to mention, in the first half of the session, I talked about MDM, and then I talked about the dual persona issue, and then we've been talking about mobile application management. 1 year ago, even less than a year ago, there was a bitter battle between MDM vendors and MAM vendors saying this way is better, this way is better. But fortunately for all of us, this really makes all of our lives much, much easier. This battle of MDM versus MAM, this is no longer a vendor versus vendor battle. The change between last year and this year is that all of the MDM vendors do application management these days, and most all of the big application management vendors do device management. So we realize now that that having both and being able to mix them freely is important. And in fact, that's why we just call it not MDM or MAM. That's why we just call it Enterprise Mobility Management now. So a few more things. I said that I would talk. I would talk a little bit about BYOD, but now BYOD is a separate conversation. And I said, well, before we may have thought of, so like, oh, iPhone equals BYOD. We know that it's iPhone and Android does not equal BYOD, and that our real issue is personal apps, personal data, and personal work styles, not who owns the device. So what that means is that when it comes to enterprise mobility management, our first step is figuring out how do we support iOS and Android. And since MDM and MAM exist now, we have that question answered. Now the question to answer after supporting the platform is, how do we support dual persona? How are we going to approach mobile app management for dual persona? And then BYOD becomes such an insignificant question, and at that point, it's no longer a technology question. By now, BYOD, it can be many different things, and when we're talking about this EMM technology, what BYOD is, it doesn't really matter nearly as much to us. BYOD can be a lot of different things. It can be, so this is like a nice natural, you guys know the term grassroots, the nice, the people, they get together on their own and decide to start bringing in their personal devices, and it can be like that. The other thing to be forewarned of, so there's the term grassroots, and then in the US a lot, we also use this term AstroTurf. And that'd be, so while grassroots is like a nice people getting together on their own to do something good, AstroTurf is like when the company gets people together to do something good, and they try to make it look like people are doing that, but really there's some big corporation behind it. So that's what happens if you say like, hey, we're going to have a BYOD program, so we're going to take away your corporate phones, and you all bring in your phones now. Which, that doesn't sound like the type of BYOD that I would like if suddenly I showed up for work and said like, hey, congratulations, you're getting a 50 pound per month pay cut because you have to pay for your own phone now. So there can be many forms of BYOD. And the other thing is, people love to talk about BYOD as a way to save money, and that may or may not be true. But all this MDM, this MAM, all this enterprise mobility management stuff, that for sure is going to cost money and take effort. And so people might think like, oh, because of those iPhones, we have to do enterprise mobility management, and those iPhones are BYOD, so that's going to cost money. Or they might say, we're going to do BYOD, and we're going to make everybody pay for their phones, for their own iPhones, and it's going to save you money. And at the end of the day, like, this technology does cost money. Whether you try to save money by making people pay for their own phone bill, that's a completely separate issue. I know I have 4 minutes left. Another thing that we talk about with BYOD is this pride of ownership effect. That if you let a user have personal information on their device, a user has a vested interest in keeping their personal information safe. So when it's on the same device as work information, when you're keeping your personal information safe on this device, you're keeping your work information safe as well. And if I lose my personal device, I'm going to go back to the hotel to get it, and that also means that I'm protecting that corporate information. And so it goes without saying that I would probably consider from the start having the management model, how you manage the device, be the same for personal devices and corporate devices. Start with that as the baseline default, and then maybe if you need to find a reason to deviate in the way you manage for personal versus corporate devices, then do that. But as the default starting point, I very, very strongly believe, should be the same policies for corporate devices. Now, you can have different policies for primary devices versus secondary devices. You might have a different policy for the iPhone that somebody uses every day versus an iPad that's shared by the department. But again, this is not about who bought it. So the last thing I'm going to mention again, I mentioned that we have MDM and we have MAM, and there are very many ways to combine the two, and there's some specific waypoints, and whether you do that like encrypted attachment thing, or whether you do no apps and just manage the device, or you don't manage the device and just do entirely apps. There's a whole spectrum of nuance in there, and that's going to depend on your. I can put that up again. The questions. The questions that are going to determine where on that spectrum are, it's going to be, your number one question is going to be email, and then whether you want to be in the business of managing devices or whether you don't want to step in that whole thing. And I know I have about 1 minute left, so I'll mention the future of enterprise mobility management. So this is going to be my session at BriForum Chicago, because this whole dual persona mobile app management thing, we're pretty new at this. So there's still a lot of different interesting ways to go. The book will have a whole chapter on this future. My BriForum Chicago session, which you'll all have access to after then, will have that information. But basically, this is my session for today, and I know I glossed over a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm sure I made my points about BYOD and dual persona. Hopefully, I've made those quite clear. So that's all for today. If there are any questions, I'm sure we have a minute or so before we get kicked out. So if there are any questions, I can take those very quickly right now. Or if we're itching to get up to the next session, then thank you very, very much for your attention. And I look forward to chatting with all of you during the rest of the conference.